In this video, I'm going to be going over a routine that I laid out in a YouTube video a little while back. It's a pretty basic routine, although it can be really effective. This isn't a routine that I would be using right now at this point in time of my playing, but I wanted to go over it so that I could kind of talk through how I would approach it, so anyone who wants to do this routine has a good resource to use for that. So we're going to start with mouthpiece buzzing. I normally start with mouthpiece buzzing, partially because I just want to get my lips, the blood flowing to my lips and things like that, but also because I think it helps with getting the focus that I want in my aperture right out of the gate. So I do, maybe 2 minutes of it. I'm just doing octave F sirens. When I'm doing these sirens, I'm focused on using poo attacks to bring everything forward so that I can already, right from the get-go, be imprinting this sort of forward way of playing so that my articulation is better just throughout my day, or more consistent would be a better way to say that. And then also, I want to make sure that there's no breaks in the sirens at all. Sometimes when I hear people do this, they'll start the siren and it's kind of wobbly at first, and then they get going, or they go fine, and then towards the end of the octave, it starts to break apart a little bit. We don't want any of that. We want it to be as consistent as possible. And so if you got to go a little slower, go a little slower. What matters is that there's no break in there, not how quickly you do it. And that's all the amount that I do. I don't. There are other people who do like things like buzzing basics, where you have a little bit more of a routine that you do with it. I personally don't do that, so I can't really speak to the effectiveness or the efficacy of that. But this is what I do, and that's why I do it, to get some blood flowing, so that when I play the first notes of the day on my instrument, feels a little bit more comfortable. Now I do my Chikowitz flow studies. I do poo attacks here for the same exact reason. I want the air to be forward. And so a poo attack, for those of you that may not know, is like a breath attack, but it's coordinated. So it should ideally sound like an actual articulation, but I'm not using the tongue to help. And so it forces you to get the articulation forward and very ready to just be released. And then I'm trying to make the best possible sound I can at the very beginning, and then just trying to keep that sound as I move throughout the registers, and trying to also keep things as smooth as I possibly can. So next is going up to the G, same exact, or the fifth, I guess, above what I just did. This is the same exact goal, 100% of the way. I feel like I'm doing it pretty well, so now I'm just trying to make sure I keep doing it. When I do the Chikowitz flow studies, I'm usually just playing at a healthy mezzo forte. I don't necessarily try to use this part of my routine to play loud or to play soft. I mostly just want it to focus on the flow of things. So when I'm doing these, I'm very, very focused on the way I'm breathing in. I'm very focused on the way I'm releasing air, trying to keep it nice and forward, trying to feel it on my lips. And basically, I'm focused on that every single repetition. If my mind wanders a little bit, I try to bring it back. This will be a huge theme throughout this entire live stream, throughout this entire practice session. It'll be a huge theme for me to say, these are the things I want to do, and I'm really, really, really focused on doing those things. The reason this is important is because sometimes it's easy to go through our practice sessions and not think about what we're doing every single repetition. We know generally we want our sound to get better, or we want our articulation to be more coordinated, or, we want something to be easier. But to be able to actually get better at these things, we need specificity in the goal. So it's not just I want to have better sound, but I want to play in the center of the pitch, and I know what that sounds like, and I know how to recreate that over and over and over again. I need to bring my very best focus to recreate that over and over again within a context or within an exercise set that I can be successful while doing it. If it's too easy, your focus will drift. You'll be bored, and if it's too hard, you're just going to be frustrated because you can't do it. So for me, this is a nice thing to do at the beginning of every practice session because it's not too easy. It's not too hard, but it's also not easy because my chops aren't fully warmed up. So it's a nice challenge for me to bring my focus forward each and every single repetition. All right, and that's usually the end of my warm-up. Everyone's got a different opinion about warming up, but for me, a warm-up is my mouthpiece buzzing, and it's my Chikowitz flow studies. It takes me about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how much I rest in between exercise sets. And then I'll continue to practice. You'll see I'll move on to long tones next. Long tones could be seen as a warm-up. For a lot of people, it is seen as a warm-up. The reason I don't see it as a warm-up is because I have very specific goals for my long tone exercises. So in my mind, it's semantics, but in my mind, I'm thinking now I have a specific goal. It's not just to get blood flowing, but it's to imprint and ingrain certain habits that I want. Now I am practicing. So that's my take on warming up and the difference between that and practicing. So if we look here, I have typed in everything that was on the video that I made, and the YouTube video that this goes on. I'll leave a link in the description, but I have a video called "Here's a Trumpet Routine for You to Try," or something like that. And this is the routine from that, and I'm going to go through all the exercises on here so you can see what it is and what I'm thinking and what I'm trying to put through, all that kind of stuff. So we will come back to fundamentals. We go here. So we have day one, week one, day one, and we will start with long tones at forte and at 92 beats per minute. So for long tones, the reason I like to use a metronome, it's not necessary to use a metronome, but the reason I like to use a metronome is because basically when the tempo is faster, you have less time to hold the note, right? So your face isn't quite as taxed, but it's less rest in between. And when the tempo is slower, you have to hold the note for longer, but you get more rest. So it kind of challenges both sides of the equation, I suppose. And my general protocol for this is 8 counts of playing a note, 8 beats of rest. And then using a tuner with this is a very, very good idea as well. I'm not going to use one right now, but you can check out any of the live streams that I've done in the past month. You'll see me using tuners and a drone. So as you can see, or as you can hear, rather, I'm playing them loudly because it says forte. On the other days, it will say piano. So one day will be forte, the next day will piano, then back to forte, then to piano. It goes back and forth. So what I'm trying to do here, and you can see it on every single note that I'm playing, I'm trying to focus really hard on keeping the air forward when I breathe, just like when I was doing poo attacks, but now I'm practicing coordinating with the tongue. I want to play the note right in the center of the pitch, so I'm listening for a certain quality of sound, and I'm trying to start and end the notes as beautiful as I can. I didn't necessarily end all of those notes very beautifully, and so we have this opportunity to show up and try to improve, or I guess I can show up and try to improve my ability to end a note beautifully, which I think really demonstrates musical maturity. So we can practice those three things, or those four things: keeping the air forward, good first attack, end the note beautifully, and we're trying to keep the sound as centered and as full as possible. All right, so you can take that as high as you want. I would definitely go G down to G, or low F sharp rather, like I did, and then you can just take it as high as is comfortable. This is as high as I normally take it, usually around double G or so, and you can hear what it sounds like. I get a little lightheaded when I do that sometimes, like I just did. That was a crazy feeling. You take it as high as you want. For me, I don't go much above double G right now, at least. My hope is over the course of time to be able to go higher and higher. But you can hear that the quality of the sound for the double G is still good. It may be softer, but it's not like it's any more pinched or anything like that. So as long as the sound is still good in quality and related to everything else you've done previously, I think it's okay to go higher. As soon as the sound starts to get pinched or anything like that, or you start to feel like you might be close to injuring yourself, or it just doesn't feel great, this is a sort of a long game thing. You're not going to be able to move. I guess you're not going to be able to move your range up dramatically in 1 week or 2 weeks or something like that. So for me, I just show up. I do it every day. I try a little bit. If it's not working, I put it. I stop doing it. And some days it feels a little bit better than others, and I take advantage of that. It's just trying to get in quality work over the long term with this. So next we have arpeggios, G, A, B. Now in my routine, I'll take this up to C sharp and D sharp, or C sharp and E flat as well. But as a baseline starting place, I think this is pretty good. We have it at 60 beats per minute, and so we are going to give that a shot. So the exercise is 1 quarter note, 3 beats of rest. Take it off of your face each time so that you can practice setting, taking a breath, and then moving. So obviously I missed that B on there, but I was pretty consistent throughout the rest of the exercise. So I wouldn't personally worry too much about that. I would just file it away for when I practice it in 2 days. And I don't think that my plan is bad. My plan being I want to set, breathe, release. So I think my plan is good. I just missed the note. So we're looking for an aggregate high percentage, not necessarily total perfection. Total perfection is not going to happen. But if I miss one of the myriad of notes that I played, it's going to help me feel confident that, generally speaking, I can trust what I'm hearing and I can trust my approach for how I produce sound on the instrument. So we move on to Bilin, page 6, which is this one right here. So this is super boring, everyone knows, but we want to make sure we don't skip some of these steps, right? We want to make sure that we are covering all of our bases, and if you have not practiced something like this in a long time, I would highly recommend incorporating this into your routine for a month or so, because it can be very purifying to play things like this at a very slow tempo, as you will hear me do. Trying to get perfect articulation, perfect note connection, playing in the center of each pitch, and doing it on every single permutation is very, very challenging. And we're going to give it our best shot. I find F sharp to be the most difficult of those permutations because it's just all the valves down, the intonation's kind of all out of whack, and so that plus I might be slightly running out of breath. So I find that to be very challenging. I want to make a point about something real quick, and then we'll move on. So you can see in the Gold Method app here, it says one time, one time, one time, one time, one time, two times, three times, and it says three times, right? So you can see all these different repetitions. So for something like Bilin, the way that I see it is that this is one exercise with 7 repetitions. You're challenging the same skill 7 different ways. And so personally, I don't think about repeating these Bilin exercises over and over and over again because there's so much repetition built into them. So if the first exercise, the one that starts on G, doesn't go well, I'm thinking, what will I be able to do better? And then I move on to F sharp. I don't necessarily repeat G until I get it perfect. Because again, so many of these skills that we're trying to do are skills that we want to build over time. It's not necessarily good to think that we're just going to become better at the skill of being flexible or whatever on the trumpet overnight. And so if I make a mistake and I sort of fix it over the course of 7 repetitions and I go, okay, that solution seemed to work, I'm going to keep doing that solution. That over the course of time, I think, is a more effective way to be efficient with our time in the practice room. We're not just repeating this thing over and over and over again because we're like, I got to get it perfect. We're learning from our mistakes and then trying to find a solution. But it's also effective because when we find a solution, we can just keep implementing that solution over and over again. So that's my take on that. Now we have Bilin page 12 at 78. So that is this exercise. So this is an extension of what we just did. It's just moving faster. So it requires my corners to stay fairly flexible here. So I want to keep the airstream moving very, very straight, and I want it to be intense and uninterrupted, but the corners and the tongue need to be able to be, coordinate quite well. So that is that exercise. That felt pretty good. I think there's a lot of value in sounding good in the practice room. I know we hear these stories sometimes of ex-player who can do crazy things, spent all of their time in the practice room when they were younger, just not sounding great, and that's how they learned how to do all these things that they couldn't do, and they just kept practicing. And there is a total element of truth that if we want to be able to do things, we have to practice them. So if you want to be able to triple tongue while circular breathing, at some point you got to practice it, and it won't probably sound great when you start. But I think there's also a lot of value in, I have these exercises that I've learned and I feel great about, and I'm actually just going to play them so that I can develop confidence in my ability to play the instrument that I have, right? So obviously for me, that's trumpet, but that exercise, playing it at that speed is not super comfortable. It's like a weirdly, like kind of slow tempo for it. But to be able to play it at a level where I feel like everything is connected, I'm playing in the center of the pitch most of the time. I realize not every single pitch felt great. That builds some confidence in my ability to think, well, in the middle of a performance, I can rely on and trust my trumpet playing. I think there's a lot of value in thinking about our practice sessions, or at least parts of our practice sessions, that way. So the next one is Clarke 2 odds. So we got to come all the way back up here. So there's no repeat. I didn't write a repeat in this here, but feel free to add a repeat if you want to. Feel free to repeat it multiple times. It's completely up to you. For the sake of expediting this particular video, I'm not going to repeat it at all. So it's the same goals. Great first attacks, keeping everything forward. I want my air to be nice and flowing, just like it was on those flexibility exercises, but now I have to worry about coordinating my fingers along with that. So it's just a little extra challenge. On A major, I was looking and I couldn't remember if I was supposed to do odds or evens. All right, so then we come down to, we have Clarke 3 odds at 60. So Clarke 3 odds so it's the same. We're going to start on G major here. Same exact goals. Great first attack, keeping the air forward and very consistent, and then just learning how to move through while keeping the note changes smooth. So the way I practice those Clarke studies, there's an element that you can manipulate if endurance is something that you're interested in building, which is you can see that, or you could hear at the end of every single one of those, I held the last note for 2 counts, and then I rested for 4 counts, and then started the next exercise. And I did that through the entirety of the thing. So by the time I got to the end, my face was feeling it a little bit, which is why that last little bit felt a little bit more difficult. And maybe it normally would, maybe not. But if you're someone who's struggling with something like endurance, you could put 8 counts in there in between each one of them. And when you're able to complete the whole entire exercise with 8 counts in between without stopping and putting more, then maybe you could lower it to 7 or lower it to 6 or lower it to 5 or lower it to 4 over the course of time, so that you're doing the same amount of playing, but as you're resting less, that's demonstrating that your chops are able to handle more of a stimulus as long as the playing quality remains the same, or it sort of feels the same. The next exercises we need to do are Arban exercises. The first exercise is Arban, page 30, number 25, at 88. So we're going to do this one time at 88 beats per minute. Okay, now I know I recorded it through this. I recorded it through the live stream so I could go back and listen, but if I were practicing this as my own actual routine, I definitely would have recorded that. I'd go back and listen to it, and I would make some notes. And then when I came back to it in 2 days, I would have a few repetitions to try to improve upon those notes. So a practice journal can be really effective for this, where it's you're not just writing down what you did, but you're writing down things you struggled with and possible solutions for those problems, and then you're testing those solutions. And writing it down just means that you won't forget it. So the app we have now 2 times at 72, page 30, number 24. Oh, The one right before it. Okay. Okay, and then we would do this a second time. If it were me and I was doing this for my routine, one of the things I felt like I struggled with was I felt like things kind of fell back a little bit, and I need to, just keep breathing, keep things forward. Especially as I get into the lower register, I find it's hard for me to keep it forward. In the upper register, it's pretty easy. In the lower register, it's harder, especially at a softer dynamic. So I might push the soft dynamic a little bit more to challenge this, and then try to really hear the pitch that I want, and then keep my air moving forward. Those are my 2 repetitions on that exercise. This is what practice is to me. It's just using repetition to find problems and find solutions to those problems. And so with the app, you can see that, I have multiple repetitions right here. And so in this practice session, I have the opportunity to practice those multiple repetitions. But when I have one repetition like this, or all of these exercises, again, we already talked about Bilin and how there's repetition built in. But with things like the Clarke studies, or when you only have one repetition, you're basically saying that was my repetition, and then tomorrow will be my next repetition afterwards. So instead of doing lots of it, you're almost thinking with this approach, I'm going to take all the work I would do in a day and see what it would be like to spread it out over the course of a week. And then what that does is it allows you to not worry so much about trying to get through everything, but you just have a few things you need to get through. It also allows you to sleep, which is where we learn. Sleep is where we learn. We don't learn, we challenge ourselves and we fire certain neural connections and neural pathways when we're doing something, especially when we're very, very focused in our work. But when we're sleeping, that's when wires are rewritten, and we strengthen certain ones that we want, and our brain weakens other ones that we don't want. It's a process that's incredible. It's called neuroplasticity. But that happens when we sleep or when we're resting. So we can't really force learning to happen. And so rather, quality work done over the course of time is how we get better and in a consistent manner. All right. Few more things here, and then I'll cover a few of the exercises on the other day as well. So we have Arban page 156, number 6 at 68. So this is not going to be very fast for me. I chose a tempo that was pretty low for this routine because I wanted something that if someone was struggling with triple tonguing, they could do. But feel free to adjust the goal tempo of this for your own needs. For me, my goal tempos that I'm using to challenge myself are at like 130, and this goal tempo is written for 90. So whatever it is, whatever the right tempo for you to challenge yourself. And again, this tempo is slower than the goal tempo. so that we can build in good habits. But yeah, whatever is right for you, you feel free to change the goal tempo. My goal for triple tonguing here is to keep everything nice and long but clear. Like that balance is something I've been after for a while. I don't want it to be ta 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 ta. I don't want it to be da 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 da. I want it to be da 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 da. So it sort of sounds like it's one long note, but you can clearly hear the articulation. I honestly think that was it, actually. So that's pretty cool. And then this is a 2 repetition exercise. So we're going to do that again. So if I would have played in a way where I was like, nope, that's not quite right, my second repetition will be trying to course correct. In this case, when I played my second repetition, or this first repetition, I thought it went well, I'm just trying to say, okay, can I do that again? We move from I'm learning how to do it better to I feel like I'm doing it the way I want to, and I want to now imprint that as a habit, so that I automatically just triple tongue that way, someday in the future. Pretty happy with that. So the next one is number 47. In terms of rest during this, you can put a protocol that is something like I'm going to play for 10 minutes or I'm going to play for 8 minutes and then I'm going to rest for 5 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever. You can do that. I typically approach these routines that I just go through it. I don't rest any more than I need to. And so in the beginning of the routine, I'm not resting a ton. And at the end of the routine, I'm resting a little bit more. But ideally, what's happening is that we're assigning an amount of work that is challenging for us, but that we can do. Especially when you're first doing a routine. In week 1, it might feel like a lot. And so maybe you leave a few repetitions off, or you're resting a little bit more, or you're splitting it into 2 separate sessions. But by the 3rd week or so, definitely by the 4th week, it should be much easier to get through it. Your chops will get used to it. So there is a bit of an acclimation period towards practicing this way. Even though on paper it doesn't look like a lot, it can be manipulated to really challenge endurance capacities and things like that. So that's one of my things that I like a lot about using the app, is that I can manipulate it in various ways to address whether I'm in shape or out of shape, or if I have, maybe the Brandenburg, it's like, I'm practicing with high intensity, very, very little rest, but for short periods of time. You can kind of manipulate the work that way. So 52 beats per minute, and number 47. So now we're trying to get cleanliness and perfection with the coordination between our tongue and our fingers, or between my tongue and my fingers. I was happy with that triple tonguing. It wasn't 100% perfect, but I know the next repetition will be. It was just a focus issue. I was sort of just taking a breath and going without being really dialed into what I was doing. When the tempos are slow like this, it can be easy to fall out of being very focused. It's pretty easy to do that at least in my understanding. And so, or at least in my experience, rather. No matter what tempo, no matter how easy the exercise or how hard the exercise, focus is a skill in and of itself that we have to build. Connor can speak to that. He and I worked together briefly, and that was one of the things he talked about was how focus was something he realized that he was struggling with, and how the app kind of helped keep him on track. Yeah, that was better. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is Saxa. So the reason that I put the Etude into this routine is now we're going to take all of the things we've worked on. In this case, not multiple tonguing, but we're going to take what we've learned in first attacks and in our flexibility and in our articulation work and in our finger dexterity work, and we're going to try to consolidate it all together in a musical example so we can understand how these things work together. So everything previous to this was kind of like a drill. Right, long tones were a drill. Our flexibility exercises were a drill. The Clarkes are a drill. It's not very musical in nature, and so ultimately music is what we're playing. So to be able to have something like a relatively simple etude, but that's still musical, is a really good way to consolidate all of the drills and see how they apply in a musical context. Because sometimes the drills are meant to push our limits. So I've found that when I'm pushing my limits, I can feel not great about my skill that I'm developing. But when I play some sort of music that doesn't necessarily push my limits, I go, oh, like I'm actually doing okay. It's not as bad as I think. It's just when I'm pushing my limits, it doesn't always work out. So here's repetition number 1. So I had to figure this out right here, because when you transpose to C, it becomes that, and so you can play that low, but in the non-transposed you can't. And instead of trying to play low Fs and low Es, I just transposed it up and then adjusted the line so I can get back down into it relatively soon. So F, E, F, G, A, F, A, G, F, D. So that's what I'm doing. All right, one more time. So even at slow tempos, you're trying to make it as musical as you possibly can, because ultimately this will go. Right. Eventually it'll go that fast. But we're still trying to, no matter what's happening, trying to imprint good habits always. And so instead of just playing through this etude and doing okay, or missing some stuff and then saying, okay, cool, whatever, or feeling like I have to spend a ton of time, 15, 20 minutes working on it, I basically just put it into the fundamentals app and I work on it in the same way I would work on anything else, just a little bit of dedicated time. So on the app, you can see that we should be playing this 3 times, but we're not going to do that today because today would be a day where I can sort of feel my face is maybe a little tired, and I don't really feel like going through a 3rd time, especially if I'm already feeling like I'm doing pretty well. So it's a bit of a balance. You want to manage the balance between I got to put in the right amount of repetitions, but I can't fix it all in one day. And so some things over the course of a month will fix themselves. Just putting in quality work, even 1 repetition a day over the course of a month, if it's quality every single time and you're imprinting what you want, will get you there. And so trying to remove the idea that getting there as fast as possible is optimal. That conversation is valuable to be had for sure. But what's interesting about it is that to learn something as quickly as possible, we lose out again on things like sleep. We lose out on imprinting things while we're sleeping. And so I would argue that someone who learns something in 1 week versus somebody who learned something in 1 month, the person who took 1 month to do it will probably have a better command of the skill overall. That's not a guarantee necessarily one way or another. It's just based on what I understand and what I've experienced in my own practice, a little bit of quality work over the long run will trump trying to just, barrel on through and learn it as quickly as possible. So I hope that makes sense. So we've finished this day, so we would hit complete day. So we've finished day 1, and now we would click on day 2, and you can see it says long tones piano. So it's the same tempo marking, but we would do everything at piano. and so on, all the way down to F sharp, all the way up as high as you would go. That's comfortable. So you do all that at piano. And then we have arpeggios, F sharp. So it's the same thing we did today. It's just different arpeggios. Right? And then, so that was F sharp right there. Then you would do A flat, B flat, and then C. Okay? And then we'd have Bilin, page 9 at 68. So then back to Bilin. Scroll up to page 9. Okay? Okay, so that makes sense, right? So then you'll do that whole page. And then we would do Bilin page 15 at 78. So Bilin page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 is 15. So it just goes a little higher than the last one. That exercise right there was a great example of the first one not going as well as I wanted it to because the air wasn't forward as much as I wanted it to or whatever. And so I was really focused on thinking far out there, and it worked a little bit better. So that's like an example of, okay, I had this problem. The note didn't quite speak the way I wanted to. What's the solution? I'll try the solution on the next exercise, and then it's like, okay, that's the solution. So then as I move on to the next one, I just keep applying that solution. I'm trying to implement the same solution over and over and over again. And then I would say, okay, that wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, but I think it's the right solution. I'm going to come back in 2 days when I have this exact exercise. I'm going to try the same solution, and we're just going to see what happens 2 days from now. Next would be Clarke 2 evens. So the first day we do the odds. Now we're going to do the evens. And so on. Okay, and then we would do Clarke 3 evens. Right, so all of the even Clarkes, and then we would do Arban, page 32, number 29. It's one of my favorite Arban exercises of all time. Okay. And so we're not going to do this one twice, but you would do this one twice. I'm just going over these so you have, if you're listening to this, you would have a reference. 36, number 37. All right. So you would do that twice. That's a long exercise, and so if you need to stop in the middle of it and recover and add some measures of rest, the point of playing it slow is not to beat your face up. The point is to keep the quality high, and so there's nothing saying you have to do it in one shot. And you can find examples of that in previous live streams of mine on my YouTube channel, where I have taken breaks in the middle of them or just dropped repetitions altogether. You gotta kind of learn how to do that for yourself. So number 80. So that would be the fast one. According to this, you would do this 2 times, but we're not going to do it twice right now because you should get the idea. Number 88. That's that. Number 88. And then finally, you would have the other half of the Saxa Etude. So we would start here and go to the end. And you would do that a total of 3 times according to the programming. We'd complete day, and then we'd be back to the other exercises we did earlier. The forte long tones, G, A, B, the original Bilins, except for now the tempos are different. So that's how that is put together. You can feel free to adjust the weekly repetitions, the goal tempos. You know, maybe I would start with what I've designed in that previous video. I'll leave that link in the description below. But I think that if you're someone who is struggling to have sort of consistent playing habits, a routine like this for 1 month could really go a long way in helping you get yourself back on the path of healthy trumpet playing. I did my best to explain what was going on in this routine, and so I hope it was helpful. And I'm going to post this whole thing on YouTube. I'll edit it down just a little bit so it's a little bit easier to watch. But thank you all for checking this out. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my birthday. Have a good one.